Well, now you guys get to listen to me chat for a little bit. The next person coming up was actually, my mentor as I was going through my corporate phase, and he was actually an absolute force as far as the inside out approach of marketing. So I'm presenting to you guys Hl3, and I'll be moderating for his session since he was so impactful for me. So how's it going,
Oh
HL?
my gosh, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh,
Thank you
I'm
for
literally so
having
excited that you could do this session. I know you're like traveling and you're doing so many great things with the Hl3 Collective. So it was really an honor to see you say that you could come and pop in for our session. So glad to see you here.
Sure. Glad to see you here. And I just want to say, I was able to join the prior sessions. I mean, these speakers and moderators have all been so amazing. Like, I'm taking notes.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, this is just so inspiring. So, thank you for having me, and thank you for organizing, and all of your colleagues for organizing this, because it's just been a beautiful um, slate of conversations.
Absolutely. Well, of course, my pleasure. Like I said previously, I don't know if you knew it or not, and I don't want to be emotional, but you were definitely such an impactful part of, my career and getting me to where I am today.
Ah,
Being able to work here at Influential and having an impact on the social channels, really pushing the DE&I efforts wherever I go and making sure that I feel authentic in any space that I'm in. You were definitely pivotal to that.
yes, and you know what I say? Let's get emotional. If we got to get emotional, we can get emotional. But no, I learned so much from you, to be honest. And we'll probably get into it, but we did some great stuff together, and it's just amazing to see what you're up to and to reconnect, to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can jump right in. And I think that it
Good.
would be great for, everyone to hear a little bit about the HL3 Collective because this is
Yeah.
your new baby. And I'm super excited for everyone to hear a little bit about your coaching and, how
Yeah.
you're making an impact.
Sure. And I think it's helpful. Um, well, first of all, my name is HL. It's helpful, I think, sometimes for me to explain it. My
Yeah.
name's full name is Howardly Ray III. I'm originally from down south. We all have the same names. So when I was born, my family used my initials. Everyone always asked me when I changed my name. I never changed it. It's always been HL. It's always a great conversation starter. Um, I am pretty open with my pronouns. I currently live in New York City. Um, and about a year ago, I had the opportunity to step away from my corporate role where we work together. Um, and I'll get into kind of what I did when I stepped away, specifically in this space of leadership coaching. But my career, and this is essentially, I think, why I've joined this conversation with mostly, I believe, marketers, was primarily, for over 17 years in the spaces of marketing and business development.
Yeah.
And I worked with, wide range of companies, really kind of reinventing go to market as consumer behaviors change. So being at Guilt Group as we were reinventing the mobile shopping experience, at Samsung where we were really focused on shifting our go to market based around consumer passions. And a lot of what Tyshawn and Ty were just talking about was so much of what we aspired to be as a brand, where we were, really kind of bringing our products to life through their passions and through their authentic selves. Um, and so as I grew in, as a marketer, I, became more involved in the diversity, inclusion, belonging space as a leader of an employee resource group. Um, but everything sort of came together, as we started really looking at authenticity in our go to market and what what needs to happen across the organization in order for us to be authentic in our go to market. Um, So we'll probably talk more about that. But your original question is, what am I up to, and what is the HL3 Collective? So about a year ago, I left my corporate position. I had been trained. I had my experience not only in kind of leadership in the business, I say, but I'd also been trained as a mindfulness instructor. I had done certifications in diversity and inclusion, as well as coaching. And I just got really inspired to hold space to help others really go on this inside out journey. Like, how do we step into our authenticity as leaders? I think, how do we go to market authentically as marketers? I think that takes us, we need to look at ourselves as organizations, but we really need to look at ourselves as individuals and do the work and do the healing so that we can, be authentic leaders for other people. So I focus on working with individuals and organizations on a process that I can talk a little bit more about, but really going through this kind of inside out journey, which I believe kind of develops conscious leaders and gets us from this kind of idea of performance into authenticity.
Absolutely. I think that's a great kind of overview of it all. And it's a great also segue into my next question, which is, we know that you're doing your coaching and your consulting, but how is your work really relevant to marketers and what they're trying to do?
Yeah, and I mean, I think this inside out approach, what I call the inside out approach, I built as a marketer, right? So my belief of what my definition of what marketing at large is talking to people, and my definition of successful marketing is connecting with people. And I think that in order to really connect with people authentically, especially today, now more than ever, we have to look at ourselves as organizations. So
Absolutely.
let's use Pride as an example because it's Pride Month. So, and we've heard a lot about it. I'm looking at some of my notes. Like Vanessa said, like the brands who do it wrong, like dip their toe in the water and then they disappear. David mentioned like just do it all the time, right? Like it's not just a 1 month thing. And again, I'm speaking specifically to LGBTQ, but we know this runs the gamut. And so as a marketer, and you were very much a part of this, we said, and this was across a bunch of different organizations, but some of the projects we worked together, we said, let's look at but before jumping to selling, to these consumers, let's look at how we're celebrating our employees and our team members internally. What are the changes that we need to make so that we can then be authentically in how we sell? So it's like first this notion of celebrating diversity internally and so many things that you can do to really foster that inclusivity. Then how are you serving, I think Ty was just talking about this, serving the community authentically, and then sell to them. So this whole process of inside out was really rooted in how do we go to market for Pride? Wait, let's really look at ourselves internally and kind of developing this process of celebrate diversity internally, serve those communities, and then sell to them. And so then where my philosophy on coaching came into play is that, if you take it one step up, it's how as leaders are we doing that work on ourselves so that we can hold space for a diverse team, so that we can really listen, so that we can heal, so that we can have hard conversations, so that we can take feedback. And so for me, I feel like it's it's about not just looking at ourselves as organizations, but it's about looking at ourselves as leaders and really going through that process um, to to get into alignment, which then allows us to be more authentic leaders. So that was sort of the journey, right? It started as a marketer to say like, how do we go to market authentically? What are some of the things we need to change internally so that we
Right.
can be authentic? But then it was like, wait, but as leaders, that's the requirement, right? Like we have to show up authentically as leaders to show up authentically as marketers.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that point because I didn't understand how impactful my diversity was and how much of an asset it was until I worked with a leader like you. And it really took that for me to say, not only am I talented, but I have so many things that I can add to the conversation based on my background and based on the authentic experiences that I've had. And I thought it was so interesting too that, in our previous company, that our marketing sat within the experiential center because we were kind of bringing this experience full circle in that sense of having the community of people that were there, but also pushing that through for our consumers so that they can have that experience as well. And it felt authentic. So it's
Right.
definitely a great point.
Yeah. And I will say again, I would always say throughout my career when I had, teams and managed teams, it's like, for me, my philosophy was always like structure, not for the sake of structure, structure for the sake of getting things done. So maybe I was like, quote unquote, your boss or whatever, which I don't even like using that language, but you have a very different location than I do. You have a very different experience than I do. So in many ways, like I said earlier, I'm learning from you and you're my boss in a way. And so it's about like how are we, and that's to me the notion of conscious leadership, right? Like the purpose is for us to come together as a team and to create and to make the world a better place. And the only way we're going to do that is if we're open and learning from each other, right? And so and that's where I always got my energy as a leader, is learning from the team.
Absolutely. Yeah, very, very strong team. I will say that. And I'm glad to know that we were able to really help to impact the change that you were making, not only just in the previous role, but in the HL3 Collective now. And glad to see that it's growing and it's actually bringing benefit to a lot of the marketers.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the transformative power of space? And I ask this because this kind of goes
Yep.
into the realm and overview of what the HL3 consulting business is doing. So,
Yep.
what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, um, so I think so. I first acknowledge that like the title of my this conversation is very long. I was showing my partner. He's like, "That's a paragraph," but I was like, I need all of these things in there, and I'm glad that you're asking because, for me, if like Inside Out is the platform, and conscious leaders are the ones who are able to drive that platform forward. Space is the unlock,
Mhm.
right? Like, so Brene Brown, I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to get this quote wrong, but Brene Brown has a quote that she attributes to Viktor Frankl where she says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom.
Mm.
And so, in a way, um, Ty was just talking about antidotes. I love antidotes, right? Like, in a way, this notion of spaciousness and growth and freedom and spaciousness is an antidote to busyness,
Mm.
right? To being back to back to back, to being double booked, to being triple booked. And and I'm not saying that's all going to change. Like, we are busy people, like we got a lot going on. And that's okay in a way, but if that's all you have and you have no space, then it's hard to make decisions from a conscious space. And so
Mhm.
for me, I really, once I started creating space for myself, and I'm not talking about a bunch of time, I'm talking about just being mindful about, how I'm showing up. I do a bunch of things. I'm a meditator. I like to work out. I like to walk my dog. Like any of these things that are mindful. But for me, once you know, I realized once I started making space for myself, I was able to go inward and go on that inside out journey. And I was able to show up more consciously as a leader. And I think that is what was then the unlock to some of these authentic go to market activities that we did. So I
Mhm.
always say, like, again, in my coaching practice, it's like space is is the common ingredient. And I think we'll probably get into it. What we do with that space is very dependent on you, right? Like, I'm not, like we said, like we all have very different locations and experiences, and there's all of the science behind why things need to be customized. But what is common is, especially in this world today, is we really need space, I believe, in order, as individuals and as organizations, to be authentic. Because and this is the last thing I'll say, I think, and it's been mentioned a couple times, I'll have to find in my notes. But again, if we just talk about like, oh, it's Pride Month, let's turn our logo rainbow, and then, it's July 1st and then it goes back to normal, and that's all we do. To me, that's like a check the box. You're busy, you're just doing it, and it doesn't work. And again, it sounds so simple, but if you have the space to actually think about it and process it, you make different decisions.
Absolutely. And I love that part that you're talking about is because, you know, for us, Pride is year round. This is who we are authentically, and it's year round. And we are celebrated during June, but those other 300 some odd days, we are
Mhm.
actually living through those experiences and actually having to, maneuver like everything. So I know, like for me in social, like outside of, Pride, I'm also having conversations with people, having conversations with my own family internally, trying to, like, help them be educated on different things, understanding, my pronouns, or understanding the way that I'd like to be addressed, so that I feel like I am making space, not only just in my workplace, but everywhere that I am, because that is the only way that you can really authentically live and be like yourself truly.
Right.
Know when I first came in, working in marketing back in 2016, 2017, I would never, and this is just the way that I grew up, I would never lead with the fact that, like, I was a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. Um,
Mhm.
I felt like, there were other things that I had to offer. I didn't need to put that on the table. Whereas today, even interviewing here at Influential, that was one of the first things that I brought up. Like, I'm a part of the LGBT plus community, but I'm also a Black woman. And is there space for me here? And will I have community here? And that is what drew me so much to this company, because not only internally do we have those spaces, but I get to connect with so many content creators that are looking for their space and looking for that opportunity to have a share of voice where they feel like they might not have it. So that's why I absolutely love that point that you were making.
Yes, yes. It's very, very powerful.
Absolutely. Alrighty. So my next one is, how do we move beyond performance and then into actual authentic leadership?
Yeah. I mean, and as we know, authenticity, some of these words, like, they become buzzwords, and then it's like, what do we actually mean, right? So, the way I define it, because again, so acknowledging that authenticity, I use that in the way I was describing this conversation. So I did want to acknowledge that. Like, I think we have to get specific, because it is kind of thrown around a lot. I think that authenticity is a product of alignment, right?
Mhm,
Like, I'm aligning my actions, or with my value, or my actions with my values,
right.
right? As an individual. As a company, I have a set of values, and my actions match those values. As a company, as a marketer, I'm going to market selling to this community. I
Mhm,
need to match those values. I need to be aligned with those values.
mhm,
And so, versus just, again, like, I keep using the obvious one, like rainbow logo, on, off, done. But it's like, are you actually, and I think we talked about it in the last panel, like, serving the community in a way that is aligned with our values. So
mhm,
I think that authenticity is unlocked with alignment.
mhm,
So, and I believe, so that's the first thing, right? And I think that this, I've seen that, and there's a lot of, by the way, I say inside out, there's a ton of different approaches to this, whatever we want to call it, personal development, coaching,
Right.
so whatever. But for me, like, I believe that we as leaders owe it to humanity to create spaces where everyone feels included, celebrated, fully realized, able to go after their dreams. Like that is what we as leaders should be doing. And I believe that in order to do that for others, we have to do it for ourselves, right? In order to be better leaders for others, to like realize that dream, I have to do the work on myself of getting aligned,
Mhm.
creating the space to go inward, to heal, to um, look at my bias, to all of these things.
Mhm.
And then I think once I'm aligned, that gets me beyond, you know, saying the thing on social media to look like I'm supporting it, right? Like that's I'm taking it off brands for now and saying like as individuals, a lot of times I think we get caught up in just like sharing stuff, and and again, I'm speaking to myself personally. I think at some point I'm like I'm. It's kind of this thing of like, what am I doing when no one is looking, right?
Mhm.
Like, am I doing the work? And I think that that type of work, and again, I think a lot of times people are like, it's kind of seen some, if I'm being fully honest, as like squishy and fluffy. But I'm
Mhm.
like, we talk about authenticity all the time in business.
Mhm.
And like, if we're really going to be authentic, we have to get aligned.
Yeah,
And if we're going to get aligned, we have to go inward, whether that's as organizations or as leaders. So I'm very passionate about that space. And
yeah.
I think it's a domino effect, right? Like when we do the work on ourselves, everyone else is affected in a positive way.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with that. I know for me personally, just being able to kind of like live in my truth and authentically just go through life and do things that really feed my soul. I know, for example, on my birthday about a year or two ago, when we had a lot of the BLM protests and things like that, there was one on my birthday. I did
Mhm.
not want to travel. I did not want to party. I wanted to be at that rally and protest because being a Black queer woman, like I want to support my Black community. I want to support my trans community. I want to support all of the people that are reaching out and saying, we need that support, because a lot of times we find the connection easier with people that look like us. And we're able to rally together to actually build some type of foundation for growth and change and things like that. So it's like, in my opinion, extremely important that like outside of just the workplace or outside of
Mhm.
social media, like how do you feed your soul on the things that you say that you're genuinely passionate about? And how do you go out and do that?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like it's all connected, right? Like your that is what you needed to do, you should have done. I think you did it. And it's like you bring that with you,
Mhm.
right? Like versus, you know, pushing it away. It's like you said, it feeds your soul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, sometimes we do want to push it away because a lot of times it becomes heavy. There's so
Yeah.
many things that are going on that I just want to like dismiss it because I'm like, it's so heavy on my heart. And it just makes me like, want to cry and be like, what do I
Hmm.
say to things like this? And it's like my community that helps to uplift me. I don't care if I'm crying in the middle of the protest. I know that there
Right.
are people behind me that are genuinely supporting me and stand with me in the stances that I
Mhm.
have. And that's exactly the way that I want to reflect myself whenever I walk into a room. Like, yes, I am, a Black woman, but there's so many other layers to myself that I can contribute to different people, but also to different brands in marketing as well.
Yeah, completely. And again, I think we have to be able to hold space for everyone to be where they are. Like it's not like you just said. Like sometimes you want to be one way and sometimes you want to be the other.
Hmm.
And th- that that is human,
Hmm.
right? And we need to be able to um give that, and hold space for that
Yeah,
for each other, right? I mean, I think when I say leadership, I don't mean like just like CEO, but it's like for one another. I think it's so important, so powerful.
absolutely. Affording one another like the grace to be able to, you know, share in the emotion the way that they feel is fit. Like, there's sometimes that I want to be engaged and I'm feeling really powerful about wanting to do something. And there's certain moments that I just want to be in my shell and I just want to feel the emotion and nothing else.
Yep.
And on both ends, I think it's completely okay. And I reward myself and sometimes pat myself on the back that I can have both sides of the
Yep.
fence, and it's rewarding in that sense as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in addition to your experiences as an executive in the business,
Yep.
you've also trained in a bunch of different areas as a leader with like DNI coaching, mindfulness. I know you talked about, meditation, all that good stuff. How does this all come together for your inside out approach?
Yeah. I mean, so I always kind of find like I kind of always push myself by way of learning, in different spaces, right? So, um, when I was at Samsung, actually, um, I was very much supported in my quest to. So I started meditating as an individual, a while ago, and again, it's this just notion of space. There's so many different ways to meditate or to create space. So I don't like to say that my way is the right way, but it's something that I found to be helpful. And then
Mhm.
as I grew as a leader, and with this notion of kind of going inward, this notion of creating space to get clear on where you are and how you're showing up, I actually became trained as a instructor in meditation more through the lens of bringing that into the to my corporate job versus like being an actual instructor, although I can do it if I need to. But and then like going through these certifications in diversity inclusion and in coaching, that pair with my executive experience, leadership experience, specifically in marketing, like allowed me, like I was talking about earlier, like Inside Out really started as like how are we authentic in our go to market, and
Mhm.
then it led into like how are we authentic as leaders, um, and this whole notion of creating space for conscious leadership and the inside out approach being kind of like that process. So
Yeah.
all of those different kind of like non-traditional educational opportunities, um, kind of helped me compile this journey, right? So that I work with people when I'm coaching them. So the first part of it is like I always say you can't know where you want to go until you know where you are. And my experience was I was so busy, like I wasn't even in touch with how I was feeling, what I was doing, and that's I think a lot of our experiences. So it's like
Yeah.
first creating space to understand where you are,
Mhm.
right? And like the science will tell you, like, am I showing up? Like in meditation, you kind of see your thoughts. So am I showing up in like fight or flight stress mode, or am I showing up in like rest and digest? And if I'm showing up in fight or flight mode to my team, that's gonna like domino effect on them and they're gonna be stressed, right? Like that's just the way it goes. Or, and so you can start to make different decisions. Maybe this meeting doesn't need to go here and again, so it's like understanding where you are is the first part of it,
Mhm.
exploring where you want to go, um, through like creative, enriching activities that's deeply personal,
Mhm.
um, and then integrating that into your life for, going forward. So I think again, that is to me and it's like a constant process. So all of those kind of pieces of like being in the business,
Yeah.
then working in the meditation space, working in the D&I space, like it really kind of came together and helped me realize like there is a process
Mhm.
to this. And again, my way is not everyone's way, but it's kind of a rough framework that allows each person to show up as themselves and have their own journey.
Absolutely. And I know, we're kind of getting a little bit off topic here, but you brought up some really great points. So I'm wondering, like, what are some ways that, you would recommend people like advocating for themselves as to figuring out where they are and where they want to be as far as maybe their career or even just their personal life? Like, how do you help with that journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, for me, it's like a when I work with folks, but
Mhm.
there's tons of ways, right? Like, I think it's trying different things, creating space to try different things, right, for yourself, just to start, um, you know, creating space for yourself. Um, and again, I think it's really about like where there's a Danielle Laporte has a book called what it's not called The Desire Map, and
Mm.
she has this thing. It's like all about core desired feelings. Like, how do I want to feel? I want to feel inspired. I want to feel excited. I want to feel empowered. And then you're like, wait, I don't feel like that. So I want to feel like this, but I feel like this. So
Yeah.
I'm starting here. What are the steps I need to take to get there?
Mhm.
Right. And everyone is at a different place, but I would say, it is I know it sounds like it's oversimplified, but
Mhm.
really looking at like, do I have space for myself to really look at where I am,
Mhm.
to really enrich myself so that I can figure that out. Um, and again, there are coaches and all of that stuff, but there's also like, like I always keep my like Bibles with me. Like,
Mhm.
like I have all of my books, The War of Art, The Artist's Way, like The Calling by Raw Goddess. And it's like having these um, guides that resonate with you
Yeah.
are so powerful. Um, and yeah, I just find that busyness, again, sometimes is the greatest enemy to
Yeah.
clarity,
Absolutely.
right? And so just like creating that space and figure out what you want to do with that space
Mhm.
um, can really get you into more alignment and fulfillment.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point because I think that, even though my passion is definitely social media, I started to really understand that I had also a passion for like data and analytics and
Yeah.
looking at the numbers and how that impacts things and the way that you can make improvements because the numbers don't lie. So I think that it's like when you have those, social campaigns, like, yes, you work so hard to create the content and to build it out for it to live on a social channel, but how is it impacting the communities that you're actually trying to target and speak
Mhm.
with? And how are they responding to that so that you can go back and optimize it and continue those efforts so that it's not just, as we were saying, a 1 month thing, but a year-long thing that really just makes sure that we're supporting diverse communities.
Yep.
So I think that's a
Yep.
great, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I think creativity is a huge part of this process, right? Like, I don't know if we're going to get into evidence. We're probably running out of time, but like, I look at a lot of evidence behind this. And a lot of times in business, like, we almost like separate numbers and data from creativity. But
Yes.
this sounds so nerdy, but like I see a spreadsheet, a blank canvas when I see like an empty spreadsheet. And it's like you can get so creative, you can get lost in the numbers
Yes.
and get and get to where you want to be, which what are our benchmarks.
Mhm.
But like I think it's about giving yourself the freedom to explore. And just you mentioned data, like I personally find so much creativity in data and numbers.
Yeah, I think so too, because so many people look at like data and analytics like it's a spreadsheet of numbers or whatever the case may
Mm.
be, and it can become overwhelming. But if you actually change your perspective on what the data and analytics is, it's not numbers, it's actually a story. It's
Story.
waiting for you to be created. So I love that piece of being able to say the numbers are saying this, and this is what we should really advocate and lean on as
Mhm.
we're doing work. So I think that's a great point that, we can segue into is like, what do you mean by evidence-based? Like, how does that look? And,
I'm glad I get to answer this question. Um, I so um, for me, we literally were just talking about data and science. I am, as a marketer, like huge affinity for numbers and the science behind all of the stuff that I'm talking about. Like
yeah,
you use meditation as an example, like there's tons of um, data and neuroscience behind why it works to reduce stress and all of that type of stuff. So I'll talk about, but there's three areas of evidence that it's not just science. For
mhm,
me, I also look, so I call it the evidence of science, the evidence of wisdom, and the evidence of experience.
love-
Um, and so the evidence of science and all of this kind of like this three-phased approach of understanding where you are, exploring where you want to go, and integrating that into your life, the change
yeah,
into your life is sort of backed by this notion of creating space. So if we want to look at space, and mindfulness inspired, and I use that very broadly because there's a lot of different ways to do it. Um, but we know that creating space for yourself to do different things that are enriching and meditative, whether that's journaling or whatever,
yeah,
allows you to get into a space, like I said earlier, where you can observe and be aware of where you're coming from. And
mhm,
from a brain perspective, it's like a lot of times we're coming from like fight or flight stress mode
yeah,
versus kind of this rest and digest kind of calmer mode. And
mhm,
so that alone, the creating space for yourself allows you to be more in touch with where you are. I'm not even saying you change it, right? Because the world is stressful and we're going to be stressed. But it's
yeah,
about like being aware of how you're showing up.
mhm,
Um, the second thing that I really look at and believe in that's proven in the space of neuroscience is this notion of customization and being creative. And so
yeah,
I love it because it like creativity is not always linked to science, but it's like our brains are actually, so we know patterns of brains and maps of brains broadly, but we know that our brains are actually um, more different than they are alike.
yes, very much.
Hello, diversity, right? And so but in the past, it's like, here's the map of the brain, it's
Right.
averages and it doesn't include, it's not inclusive, whatever. So now we know that they're they're more different than they are alike, which means like from a coaching perspective, it's about customizing it for you, which means let's get creative and see what works for you. When I say explore where you want to go, that's where you get creative, right? And that's when I sometimes even hesitate when I say meditation because meditation, sitting and breathing for 10 minutes can be traumatizing for some people. For me, I like it. For somebody else, they don't, or like whatever. And so that may be like walking or something else. And so that is like the science behind, you know, backing up this kind of notion of customization and creativity. And then the last piece is of this work that I do is consistency,
Yeah,
right? Like, so we know that we can change, behavior and patterns of the brain. It's
right.
called long-term potentiation. But basically that means is, you've got to figure out like this notion of creating space. Like you got to do that on a consistent basis. You got to figure out what works for you. That's
Mhm.
taking care of yourself. And that takes us all the way back to what we started on is that's conscious leadership.
Yeah,
That's inside out. So that's science. Tell me, I'll wrap this up quickly. So that's science. And then the wisdom part is um, these things that we're talking about, this kind of philosophy around creativity or mindfulness. Let's be honest. And I think sometimes in business, we're so data focused that we kind of lose this kind of space of wisdom. But the
mm,
truth of the matter is, the science really just backs up these traditions that have been around for thousands of years,
right.
right? And so I think it's important to look at these traditions um, And I was just reading something this morning in The Artist's Way where she says, Julia Cameron says this exact same thing, right? Like, management consultants in the pursuit of corporate physical health have learned to think of meditation primarily as a stress management technique.
Mhm.
Spiritual seekers choose to view the process as a gateway to God. So there's all, but there's just, it's like this broader kind of notion of um, it being an unlock for you and your authenticity. So I just always like to say I pull from science, of course, like you heard my what I just rattled off, but I also think it's important to acknowledge the origins of a lot of these traditions
Mhm.
because again, science is really just backing them up. And then the last part is just pulling from experience, my own experience, the experience of my mentors. I think that there's so much evidence in our own personal experiences that's important to bring into the fold.
Absolutely. I thought you brought up some great points as well, because I know definitely because of the pandemic, a lot of people have like seen a shift in like themselves and like trying to
Mhm.
figure out the next step. And I know for me, during the pandemic, I felt like I was really experiencing what they call imposter syndrome. I was like,
Mm,
I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I just really was like, where do I go from here? And journaling really became a big and pivotal point for me because I was able to actually track my progress and say, girl, you are not an imposter. You know exactly what you're doing, but that self doubt really sometimes gets you. And being able to see your journey on paper through journaling,
yes.
that have really let me know that I'm in the right space. I'm doing what I love and I am making an impact,
Mhm.
even if I didn't have a good day or a good week or whatever the case may
Right.
be. I'm great at what I do, and I just
Right.
absolutely love being in that space. So,
Yeah, and that's so like you said, journaling, which is actually what the artist way is all about. She calls it morning pages, but it's like journaling is a meditative experience that works for you and you did it and you do it or did it consistently.
yeah,
Right? And some days you're like, I don't want to do this,
yeah.
right? But you keep going, and that's when you really see the benefits.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got one last question, HL, and don't feel, bad to go in here because I think that, a lot of the conversation that we're having is really, really important, not just for marketers, but also individuals that are going through that shift. Like midlife crisis is no longer a thing. Like we are all starting to self-reflect and see things very differently in this new era of like post-pandemic life and what the digital era looks like. So, the last area of evidence is experience. And how
Mhm.
did you pull from your own experience to really help to make HL3 Collective what it is, but also to be in your own authentic self today and feel like you're living in your truth and being able to build from that?
Yeah. I mean, I've talked a lot. I love this question. I've talked a lot about my kind of professional experience. So I think I'll go to super personal, super tender
Love that.
childhood, right? Like I grew up in conservative, small town, Alabama, um, and I learned early on that the path presented to me um, for a young boy was very narrow, right?
Mhm.
And it was not aligned with
Yeah.
like I just wasn't fitting in, right? And so what I quickly learned is that there's always an alternative path. There's always another path.
Mm.
That path is many times the road less traveled.
Mhm.
Um, but it's like that bold move into it's that's the bold move into that. I learned that early on, right? So I was like so uncomfortable playing sports. I got into the arts. David talked about creativity earlier
Yeah.
and how that was so life-giving
Mhm.
and enriching. And I had that same exact experience.
Yeah.
Was it easy? No. Did I get made fun of? Yes. Was I the only boy in the tap class? Yes. Like all of these things. But it made me learn early on that the bold moves are sometimes the hardest, right? And somebody said recently to me that it really resonated. confidence is not the prerequisite, courage is. And
Ooh,
that's like that took me to where I am now. Like
yeah.
when I started my own business and doing all this stuff, like yes, scary. Was I completely confident? No, right? But it's like going back to the younger me of like, this is scary to step away and do this tap class or be in community theater,
Hmm.
and I'm probably going to get made fun of, but I'm not, this is more my journey,
Yeah.
right? And so I think those bold moves are sometimes defined by the road less traveled, right? But there's always an alternative path. And the
Yeah.
second thing that I think helps us really support us on these journeys are our champions, right? Like I think in lyrics and quotes from divas. So Lady Gaga has the quote that everyone kind of giggles about because she said it so many times. But this notion of 99 people in the room, one believes in you, and that can change everything.
Yep.
So thank God my mom was the one who took me off the basketball court and helped me get into the arts, right?
Yeah.
Like she was my champion. And that is, I think it's like they kind of go hand in hand, this alternative path, these bold moves into the alternative path,
Hmm.
um, but supported by champions that you really trust. That's essentially taken me where I am today, right? Like if I can hold space and be a champion for someone else to step into their authenticity,
Yeah.
to be fully realized, to be fully expressed, to pursue their dreams,
Hmm.
like that is the experience that got me where I am today.
Absolutely. I definitely, resonate with that so much because, growing up, I dealt with bullying and then I started to also have that as well, like within the workplace in certain scenarios. And I was so kind of like timid to speak up for myself or say anything. And I know I got to meet leaders like you that let me know, like, you have a brilliant mind, speak up, talk about these things, there's value here. There's so many projects that I was like so iffy about, and you were like, no, you've got some good ideas here, like let's make sure you run with it, like you have things to add to the table. And you always made sure that no matter if it was me or anyone that looked like me or whatever the case may be, that they had a seat at the table. You always were saying like, I need these type of people at the table, I need to make sure that they have a share of voice whenever we're working on this type of content or this type of campaign. And I think that that's really what made an impact for so many people, not just within the workplace, but for so many people that were, interested in how do you get to where you are? Like, how do you become like, or how are you able to kind of live out loud? And it's like, I've had people that really pushed me to do that because at first I couldn't see myself doing that at all. I just figured like, do what you're told because that's the way that I grew up. You do what you're told and you don't argue and you don't fight back, just do what you're told. And it was really me having to have leaders and mentors like you that said, no, speak up for yourself. There is value in the things that you have in your mind. Make sure that they come out to the forefront because there's so many things that you can grow from this. And to this day, I'm like shocked that I've been able to live authentically, and it's been great to be able to, grow continuously. Your growth never stops. The journey, it never stops. You're always healing. You're always growing. You're always finding out new things about yourself. And I just know that there's different pieces of that that really help to transform me to be where I am today.
Yes. Well, you're brilliant. I'm so, I learned, like you said, like I said earlier, I learned so much from you and we went through so much together. And so I'm just so grateful for everything that you've done. And I'm so excited for you and your journey.
Yes, I love this conversation, HL, because I feel like it was like a good throwback session of us just like
Totally.
office and like having a good chat for a little bit,
Yes.
really just kind of getting personal. And, I've heard HL's story before. He's led a lot of our employee resource group summits and things like that. And I've heard his story before, but every single time he tells it, like it's always still impactful to me because I just feel really, really good and like inspired to be like, okay, I can tell my story too. And there's space for that now. We've got TikTok, we've got, these creator platforms that are in place for us to tell our story and to build community. And it all started from, just this, having conversations in someone's office that led me to be like, I can do this.
Yes. Awesome.
Amazing. Well, I thank you so much,
Thank
HL, for
you.
joining and being able to have this chat with me. We will definitely catch up probably this
Yes.
weekend or something,
Yes.
but I really
Sounds good.
appreciate your time so much, HL.
Yes. Thank you all and happy Pride. We'll talk
Yes,
soon.
thanks, HL. Bye.